So welcome everybody. Good morning to those of you in the Americas and good afternoon to those in Europe and elsewhere. My name is Sebastian Mag and it's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Chemours team to this webinar on Protect Your Business, where you will learn how you can participate in the EU REACH PFAS process amid the second call for evidence. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Cédric Triquet, who will kick us off. And just a reminder for you all that before we start, there will be a recording of the session, which we will share after. And more importantly, there is a chat function available where you can submit your questions. So please make sure to submit your questions through the questions function rather than the chat, and we will be addressing them towards the end. And in the case that we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up individually with those. Without further ado, Cédric, you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone here. Thank you for being with us today. I am Cédric Triquet. I am the Sales Director for Chemours Advanced Performance Materials in Europe. And in today's webinar, experts from Chemours Advanced Performance Material business will run through how you can protect your business amid recent regulatory developments in the European Union and help shape a more constructive regulatory outcome of the PFAS restriction process under REACH. We are grateful of your time today and your engagement on this important issue that threatens to affect our collective freedom to operate, not only in Europe, but across global value chain. This is why today we have people joining this webinar from other regions, other continents, because this is definitely not only a European topic, but touch every company which is somehow making directly or indirectly business in Europe. So before we get started, I would like to share a quick legal reminder disclaimer here. I'm not going to read this slide. I will let you do so, but I'd like to remind a certain number of principles here. Although jointly undertaken activities among competitors, such as this customer webinar, can serve useful and legitimate purpose, the parties must remember that such activities are subject to close scrutiny under the antitrust laws of the United States or the competition laws of Europe, and also similar laws in other countries or jurisdictions. If not properly conducted, discussion and information disclosures, such as those contemplated during this customer webinar, can lead to serious legal problems for the parties and their representatives. It is therefore essential that the parties adhere closely to the legitimate purpose of any discussion or information disclosure in appearance as well as in reality. So thank you for your commitment to this. Let me move to the agenda now for today. We have a lot to cover. So here is a quick overview of what we will discuss with you in this webinar. The first thing is we will walk you through why we are here today. That is a very important grounding for today. Then we will share our point of view on this issue and how we are working to address the concern. We will update on the PFAS restriction process under REACH and explain how you can have your voice heard in this second call for evidence. As Sebastian stated in introduction, we will take the time for a question and answer. And again, I repeat, you can submit your question through the system here. We will tackle a certain number of those, and if we cannot take all of them, then we will see how we can follow up. So once again, warm welcome to all of you today. Thank you very much. With that, I'll hand it over to my colleague and president, Denise Dignam, who is again the president of Chemours Advanced Performance Material. Thank you, and Denise, the stage is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Cedric. It's good to be here today to connect with all of you on this important issue. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Your partnership is highly valued, and we hope the information we provide today is useful to you. We thought it would be helpful to start with some foundational information. So first, a quick refresher on PFAS, or to those of you who are not familiar with the term, what are PFAS? Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, known as PFAS, are a diverse group of chemicals that contain carbon-fluorine bonds, which are the strongest chemical bonds in organic chemistry. PFAS contain CF2 and CF3 building blocks. So what's going on with PFAS? Formalization of the PFAS restriction process under REACH. This regulatory initiative could potentially ban or restrict PFAS in non-essential uses across the EU by 2025. On July 15, 2021, an intention to restrict PFAS was filed, which officially started the PFAS REACH restriction process expected to run until 2025. Immediately following the regulatory initiative, the REACH competent authorities issued a new call for evidence. The second call for evidence provides an opportunity to shape the regulations of thousands of chemicals in the EU. The national authorities driving the process are considered regulating all PFAS as one large group. The grouped scope of chemicals in the EU PFAS REACH restriction was defined simply on the basis of structural characteristics, while ignoring the safety, societal benefits, and existing regulatory frameworks governing particular subsets of those substances. With that context in mind, let me underscore the objective of today's webinar. We want to give you the tools you need to protect your business through active participation in the PFAS REACH restriction process. To expand on that, we're reaching out to you through this webinar because we would like to create awareness of the regulatory process and encourage submission of data to shape a more constructive regulatory outcome. The second call for evidence is a unique opportunity to do so, but we need you to act. Chemours cannot do it alone. The regulatory authorities want to hear from you. Our goal is that you walk away from the webinar today with the ability to do two things: submit your own response to the second call for evidence and encourage your customers, trade associations, and peers to submit their own responses and engage in a broader EU industry dialogue on the safe and sustainable use of chemicals in the EU. It is on all of us to ensure industry is well represented as part of the process. Later in this webinar, we'll go over more specifics of how to submit your response and what to consider while doing so, as well as what your own customers and peers need to know. Since this regulatory process is specific to European countries, you may be looking at it from a EU-centric perspective. However, it reaches far beyond. Essentially, everyone is impacted, both within and outside of the EU. It's important to remember these regulations will affect businesses around the globe. Supply chains that include parts of its production, processing, or commercialization in the EU will be impacted by any PFAS restrictions. Any business that trades, processes, or has parts of its supply chain in Europe could see its freedoms to import and export impacted. EU regulations often influence policy in the Americas and other markets. PFAS REACH restriction is no exception. Policies elsewhere in the world often mimic EU frameworks, making regulations such as REACH a precursor to those elsewhere around the world. This is more commonly referred to as the Brussels effect. Several of your own customers might ask the question, but I don't manufacture or use PFAS, why should I care? The truth is, overly broad regulation can have devastating effects on the value chain, where downstream users of these chemistries would bear the burden. Allow us to illustrate the restriction could have a domino effect across the value chain with just one common example from industry. If fluoroproducts can't be manufactured or distributed, shaft seals can't utilize fluoroproducts like Viton fluoroelastomers, which can operate in challenging temperature, pressure, and chemical conditions of the engine. Rotating shafts in engines without the proper seals may leak oil and lubricants and limit the lifespan of multiple engine shafts. Engines may not be able to operate safely, and substances may leak onto the engine. Traditional combustion engine and newer electric vehicle and fuel cell electric vehicle can't be deemed safe to drive without proper functioning engines. To be clear, this example of shaft seals would not only affect traditional combustion engines, sometimes referred to as ICE engines, but also electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles that work towards global emission reduction goals. The continual adoption of these more sustainable forms of transportation are largely reliant on the continued use of fluoroproducts like Viton. Beyond geography, businesses across the entire value chain may be severely impacted by these regulations. As you can see illustrated on this slide, the inability to manufacture parts with the necessary combination of properties needed for end products may have safety implications. Cars is just one example. Additionally, fluoroproducts are critical to meeting many of the sustainability and innovation goals set by governments around the world. Inadequate regulations of fluoroproducts would hinder our ability to meet those goals and continue innovating and creating a more sustainable society. Chemours is confident that a constructive regulatory outcome can be achieved between now and 2025. Chemours supports coherent regulatory approaches that lead to the use of safer, better performing chemicals in the EU and which enable the sustainability of the EU industrial value chain. An accurate and complete view of the use and value of our chemistries is key to achieve this. Therefore, we are encouraging the whole value chain to collaborate with the authorities and submit information. We support science-based regulation. The challenge with the supergrouping of PFAS by structure alone is that it fails to consider performance properties, uses, availability of alternatives, and existing regulatory tools. Thus, industry, including our customers, can provide information on uses, performance requirements, and unique properties, lack of alternatives, and socioeconomic impact to ensure an informed approach by regulators that takes into account these realities. In the case of the proposed PFAS regulation, we maintain that fluoroproducts should be regulated in a way that takes into account their safety profiles and importance to society on a case-by-case basis. And we support the use of existing regulatory tools so as to assure regulatory coherence. Along these lines, we are organizing efforts to help create an industry dialogue and a wave of engagement with authorities that leads to a constructive result for all stakeholders. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague Dirk for an overview of our commitment and the PFAS REACH restriction process.
Thank you, Denise, for your kind introduction. Before I go into the restriction process itself and the second call for evidence, I want to stress that as a manufacturer of fluoroproducts, we at Chemours take our responsibility very seriously. We have formulated a strong commitment on emission reduction. By 2030, we aim to reduce air and water process emissions of fluorinated organic chemicals by 99% or greater. And in order to achieve that, we have invested and continue to invest heavily in our facilities across the world in emission reduction technologies. These technologies position our facilities and Chemours as a company as best in class for air and water emission control. To give you two examples, at the Dordrecht works in the Netherlands, the Dordrecht facility in the Netherlands, we are investing 75 million towards achieving our 2030 goal to reduce PFAS emissions to water and to air. And for one of the processing aids, we in fact already accomplished that. And to give you another example, in the Fayetteville Works facility in the US, Chemours successfully deployed the thermal oxidizer that destroys 99.999% of all PFAS air emissions and represents a 100 million investment. Now that we have stated our position and shown our commitment to address the key concerns expressed by the competent authorities in Europe and resulting now in this intent to restrict PFAS, I will provide a detailed overview of the ongoing PFAS restriction process and the call for evidence. Yes, here you see the process, and I'm not going to go into every detail, but it is important to realize that this is in fact a multi-year process. And there are several windows of opportunities for stakeholders to shape the outcome of the restriction process. The REACH restriction process has several milestones, and some of you will recall that following the informal announcement last year of 5 countries to work towards PFAS restriction, there has been already a call for evidence in June 2020. Following the entry into following the entry into the Registry of Intentions, which was done on July 15 of this year, which marks the formal start of the development of the restriction process, we now have a second call for evidence, which is a far more specific and tailored one, where the authorities are intending to try and address information gaps. And I will go into that second call for evidence in a moment, but again, it is important to note that this is just one opportunity for stakeholder involvement, as well as for the possibility to inform the authorities and thus influence the formation, the writing of the restriction outcome. The restriction proposal itself will not be published before July of next year, and following the publication next year, there will be another 6-month public consultation. Again, although this is just one step, it is important to act now. If the authorities have an incomplete and inaccurate view, now they will develop an incomplete and inaccurate proposal, and once the proposal is published, it's going to be much harder to change the proposal further down the line. The highly complex nature of this PFAS restriction process has generated many information gaps following the first call for evidence. And authorities are trying to address those by collecting additional industry data, including data on your sector and your downstream and your customer sector, regarding the uses of PFAS, possible alternatives of PFAS, and expected socioeconomic impact of a proposed restriction. This might be the best chance industry has in providing factual input into the process before the restriction dossier is submitted next year and moving forward in the years to come. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I will zoom in on the call for evidence right now. It may be easy to think that your suppliers, like Chemours, will ensure that the regulation doesn't impact you or your ability to manufacture the products that you make. But the authorities are specifically looking at from input from the entire value chain, so including you and your customers. They want to understand how the regulation might impact your business. And of course, Chemours is going to submit a response to the call for evidence on how a possible restriction might impact ours, but you have a lot of leverage as well. It is also important to note that this call for evidence is to address data gaps. If the regulators don't receive any submissions, then the rule of no data, no market might apply, and authorities might assume there isn't a market and maybe just blanket regulate. Although there will be, as I've said before, there will be other opportunities to impact the regulation. The time to act is now. It's better to have your voice heard now before the decisions are made and before the restriction proposal is being published. Plan on submitting and engaging with your customers, with your peers, and with your trade associations. Okay, so now this call for evidence, which is the second one in this process, consists of a questionnaire and so-called consolidation report summaries, organized by users and sectors. There is a tight timeline, as Denise already mentioned, because the deadline for submitting additional information is September 19, which is a little over a month. And even though CEFIC and 14 other trade and industry associations have asked for a 1 month extension of the possibility to submit, we will keep you informed, of course, regarding potential extension, but we are currently planning for September 19. And it is important to note that this is an opportunity to submit information about how fluoroproducts are used in your industry and what the socioeconomic impact could be if there would be a restriction. While we and other trade associations continue to argue with the authorities that fluoroproducts should not be restricted under REACH, and of course we will continue to do so, this call for evidence is not the opportunity for you to make that case. It's also not the time to begin attributing essentiality to the to applications in your sector. Because we don't know what definition the European Commission will use for essential use, and that will only unfortunately be established by 2023. Okay, so the call for evidence submission document contains 16 sections. The questionnaire contains 16 sections and include areas directly relevant to your businesses. A few are mentioned here. So medical, construction products, electronics and energy, transportation, but they also include petroleum and mining, lubricants, and several other uses. You should only submit information for those sectors which are directly relating to your business. So please remember to label sensitive information to be submitted as confidential. unlike other consultations, the submissions will not be made public by the authorities. But the authorities at the same time have stated that they will not be held liable for any damages that might be caused because of accidental publication of data. So it's the responsibility of the submitter to mark data and attachments as confidential. For each of the areas in the questionnaire, please submit data on the usage of fluoroproducts as well as any information on alternatives. And in this regard, it's particularly useful to use the following criteria when describing these alternatives: the impact on volume, the impact on safety and health performance, the impact on on the performance of the product itself and the benefits, including the environmental benefits, the impact on cost, feasibility, and the ability to meet regulatory requirements. Now, estimating socioeconomic impact in such a preliminary point of time, especially since we don't know yet what is going to be in the restriction proposal, is of course extremely complicated and challenging. But as much information as you can provide is helpful. And if that would be the case, an acknowledgement that you cannot measure the impact of a proposed restriction is also valuable information to the authorities. Based on the past REACH restrictions experiences, here are some scenarios we would encourage you to consider when determining the impact. The restriction might contain provisions pertaining to labeling, and labeling might imply that you have marketing costs, that you will need to spend time and money on relabeling and possibly repackaging. The restriction proposal might contain concentration limits, in which case you would have to measure and you would have to invest in measurement equipment. There might be an outright ban, which consequently implies that you have substitution costs, as well as potential environmental impacts or performance impacts for your business. There may be time-limited derogations, which is another scenario, which basically means that you can continue the use of PFAS-containing products until a certain date. But that, of course, requires additional planning, technology adoption, and also uncertainty. In all of these scenarios, it's worth considering what the impact across the supply chain would be. So not only for you, but also the cost for your suppliers and your downstream users. So why is this second call for evidence so important? The questionnaire allows manufacturers and downstream users of chemicals to provide detailed information on how fluoropolymers might impact, for instance, EU ambitions in the fields of sustainability, energy and climate, net zero, the digital strategy, hydrogen economy, hydrogen ambitions, etc. But detailed information will also provide for safer, better performing chemicals across the EU industry. And it will also encourage companies to apply responsible manufacturing. An accurate understanding of this by the authorities will positively influence the PFAS restriction process, over the next couple of years. Now to go back to what we highlighted at the start of the presentation, I will pass back to Cedric, who will reinstate our call for action in this second call for action coming out of this webinar.
Thank you, Dirk. Thanks. Well, again, I am not going to repeat. A lot has been said. Thanks to Denise and Dirk here. I hope this is now much clearer for all of you based on the information we have provided today. Again, what is important now is that with the unique opportunity that this call for evidence presents for the industry to shape the regulatory outcome, we are basically asking you to do two things now. The first one is to submit your own response to this second call for evidence. Obviously, you don't have to respond to every sector. As explained by Dirk, this call for evidence is split in several sectors. You just need to do the one, to focus on the one which are directly relevant for your business. But please be thorough with the data and specific examples, as well as their reasoning behind your estimations of the socio-economic impact of the proposed legislative measures. The second thing we are asking you to do is to encourage your customers, trade associations, peers to also participate and submit their own response to engage, in order to engage in a broader EU industry dialogue on the safe and sustainable use of chemicals across Europe. These two aspects are, let's say, or these two requests, actions we are asking you to tackle is basically what we think is critical for the success of this journey. Again, I repeat what Dirk said earlier on. If you expect us as Chemours, as chemical producers of fluoroproduct to reply, we will definitely do as we did in the past. But we don't think it's going to be enough, because the chemical producers only to reply, but the entire value chain and what are all applications markets that are going to be impacted here. And this is why this is so critical that you and your customers engage into this journey as well. It will be key to spread awareness of regulatory developments and how important engaging over the next year will be before the legislative action begins. So we want to ensure industry is well represented as part of the process. And this is, again, very important. We are going to shortly start the Q&A session. I repeat what we said also in introduction. You can submit your question through the system here. We will tackle some of them. I can also reinforce maybe something we did not say earlier on, is that your question will be anonymous for other participants. So basically only us as Chemours representative and an organizer will be able to see the questions. So don't worry with this in case this might be a concern. And again, shortly after this webinar, we will provide you an info packet with additional information and resources on the submission process and on how you can play on these two requests I just described, and the expectation we have for you to submit your response into this second call for evidence. The next steps now, Chemours will continue to be a trusted partner for you across this process. We think we had a leading position into this journey already since for a few months, and since last year, since the first call for evidence, there has been a lot done in order to try to communicate, educate, and share what we think we have to do. And we will continue to do so. Therefore, we encourage you to please reach out to us in case of any question you might have before the deadline of September 19th for the second call for evidence, and also beyond. Obviously, of course, we would be very happy to engage with you across the process, also in further steps or into the next one that are going to come up after September 19th. But again, we repeat, the time is to engage now. We have to be proactive to positively shape this critical process that affects all of our businesses. We thank you again for your time today, and once again, we'll be glad to tackle a certain number of questions that may have raised or that you have, and you can still document or raise into the system here. Once again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your participation, and we really hope that this has been very fruitful for you and making this complex topic much clearer for all of you. Thank you.
All right, so I've seen a few questions pop up from the audience in the questions function. Just a reminder, as Cedric said, that the questions that you submit will not be visible to all the audience, so feel free to submit any questions you might have, and it won't show who is submitting them, or it's all anonymous. The first one we have up here is, have PFAS already been banned in certain countries or states in North America? And are there others you are aware of that you can share? And with others, I assume they mean other jurisdictions that you are aware where PFAS have been banned that you can share past experiences from. I think Dirk and the team, maybe you might be able to take that one.
Yes, I'm not intimately familiar with the situation in the US, but I know that in fact some jurisdictions, be it state level or county level, have acted on PFAS. As to other regions in the world, there are a lot of activities going on right now. In the EU, we have this announcement of this broad PFAS restriction, but already some groups of substances have been restricted, notably with a large number of derogations, I must say. For instance, PFHXA, salts and related substances. And we also expect probably within 1.5 months a registry of intention, the registry of the intention to restrict PFAS in certain for certain uses as in firefighting foams. Would that answer your question?
And do feel free to follow up.
Maybe I'll just add that the conversation is very active globally. We're engaged globally, and we all need to be engaged. I think there is an opportunity to influence, and that's why that's why we believe this is so important.
My apologies, I was on mute. I'm taking a question here. The next one from the audience is a question on the past call for evidence. issued by the authorities in July 2020. And the question particularly is, what happened with all the provided submitted responses last year? These took a lot of time to develop, and the concern from the person asking the question is, how can we be sure that this time all the input will be considered by the authorities? You'll remember the July 2020 call for evidence was a more broad, general questionnaire. So anyone on the team want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. The information that was submitted in the first call for evidence have been processed by a number of consultants that were contracted by the 5 countries that are developing this restriction proposal. These consultants have apparently delivered reports on their findings, and these the summaries of these reports have been made public. And if you go into the questionnaire that was developed for the second call for evidence, you will see a number of links to so-called report summaries. Has every piece of information been taken into account, and is there a guarantee that all information will be taken into account? We must hope for the best, of course, but we're not certain, because the full reports by the consultants have not been made public.
Sebastian, you are on mute again.
Thank you, Dirk. The next question I have here is, what does Chemours expect to result from the regulatory process? And maybe, Cedric, you can take this one on.
Yes. So Chemours is confident that a constructive regulatory outcome can be achieved between now and 2025. We support coherent regulatory approaches that leads to the use of safer, better performing chemicals in European Union, and which enable the sustainability of the European industrial value chain. In the case of proposed PFAS restriction, we maintain that fluoroproducts and F-gas should be completely exempted because of their safety profile, important applications, and changes in existing regulatory frameworks dealing with those substances that would see to the concern which authorities are attempting to address through the PFAS restriction. Fluoroproducts play a critical role in achieving important societal goals and are critical to achieving many of these European most important initiatives, especially the ambitious goal set for the European Green Deal. They are also critical to numerous segments in the European economy, and European residents and people around the world rely on the products that fluoroproducts enable every day, and will rely on, as fluoroproducts will enable innovation in sectors of the economy that the Europe considers of strategic importance over the coming decades, including accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart mobility, for example, enabling the hydrogen economy, and making Europe's digitalization strategy a reality. These are some examples. Hopefully this reply to the question.
Yes, I have another one here that is a bit more practical. Says, can we forward the info packet we received from Chemours that will be shared at the end of this webinar, and to our trade association, to our customers, and industry peers?
Yeah, so I think we've this is what we've I mean, one of the main purpose of this webinar is to engage the value chain as much as possible. You as our customers, but not only your customers, your association. So yeah, I think this webinar is recorded, is going to be available afterward for attendees, but also for people, contacts who have been invited and who could not make it. So there will be a possibility, and the info packet we mentioned is going to be a great tool for you to support and understand where you can access this call for evidence and the different pillars, let's say, the different sectors of the industry which are pulsed here. And therefore, all this information will be definitely available for you as well as for your customers. Hopefully this is clear enough.
Absolutely. We'll be following up right after the webinar with the materials. You will get that shortly. On that note, I have another question here on a similar vein, which is, does the info package contain an example on how to complete our response? Simply a guideline or an example? And I'm going to merge that with another question, which is, what if there are applications which are missing in the 16 sections of the call for evidence? How should we act in that case?
Yeah.
So maybe Dirk, yeah, you better position to reply.
On the first question on guidance, we can provide a link to the site. It's actually the questionnaire is hosted on the site of the German authorities, and the questionnaire itself contains some good guidance. Suggest we include a link to the questionnaire in our info package. As to the second question, many users it has already been identified that some users have not been described by any of the consultants in any of the report summaries. There is in the questionnaire a possibility to indicate users that are missing from the questionnaire. So, in fact, the questionnaire allows you to identify missing users. What that information will trigger, I don't know. I should think that that should be a reason for the authorities to inquire more, but I'm not certain about that. But there is the possibility to submit those unidentified users in the questionnaire.
Great. I'm going to read maybe another one and then a last one. I'm cognizant we might not get to all the questions, so we will definitely follow up individually. But another one from the audience is, to your point, Dirk, is how is Chemours reacting to the entry into registry of intentions to restrict PFAS? And thus, how is Chemours planning to respond to the call for evidence launched by the competent authorities on July 19th? Anyone who wants to add some clarity on that?
Yes, well, we are in the process of drafting a response, primarily, of course, on the manufacturer, but also some other sectors. We are scrutinizing the report summaries. Again, we will at this stage not argue on, let's say, PFAS definitions or essentiality, because this questionnaire is not about those type of, I would say, more political questions. But obviously our response is going to be quite extensive, and we've already submitted, I think, 130 pages or 150 pages even in the original call for evidence. So, but we will add to that.
Great. And just I've seen this question come up quite a bit, and I'm happy to just address it. Indeed, the link to the actual questionnaire to fill out the call for evidence and submit a response will be included in the materials we share after this webinar, including the info pack. So yes, you will be able to access exactly where to respond right there. I've seen that question from a few folks in the audience, so thank you for that. Going on to more sector-specific ones, we have a good one here on automotive industry applications. So the question is the European automotive industry involved and submitting information, as well as larger consumers of such products that they are they involved? And I'm not sure who on the team wants to jump on that.
Yeah, I can. Sorry. You go first.
Okay, thank you, dear. Well, I mean, we are not necessarily aware about all players. We know some of the customers or some of the players who reply to the first call for evidence last year. We don't necessarily have an exhaustive picture today of who is going to reply, which if you talk about automotive OEM, who is replying, who is going to take it. But I mean, this is what we are trying to do here, is to really make you aware, your customers aware, so that at the end also automotive OEMs will reply. So this is a collective effort. Chemo will do as much as possible in order to encourage value chain players to reply and to participate. But again, we ask you, and we really encourage you, for those of you involved in automotive industry, to talk to your customers, your first tiers, your second tiers, or you're directly with the automotive OEM you are working with, so that they realize what we are talking about. Because the scope is so large that, again, there are a lot of products which are involved here, and which might be under, as we said, under strong regulation in the future. So again, we are working hard on this, but this has to be a collective effort. Hopefully, this is clear enough. I don't know, Dirk, if you want to add something, obviously.
Yes, I would want to add. It's clear that not only private initiatives such as this webinar are going on, but trade associations are reaching out to downstream users as well. Both CEFIC, which is the European Chemical Industry Association, as well as, for instance, the gas sector and the fluoropolymers trade association, reach out to downstream users, including associations like ASEA and CLEPA. I'm not aware of automotive OEMs, but it's my understanding that ASEA, the European Automobile Industry Association, will respond to the call for evidence, as will a number of other associations like Hydrogen Europe, for instance.
Sebastian.
That brings me to my next question here, which is, can you name specific products supporting or serving the Green Deal? Some tangible examples, as well as perhaps some references to Chemours' own commitments, could be helpful in in saying how concretely they're contributing to the Green Deal, the products under the scope?
Sure, Sebastian, I can answer just some general application. If you think about what is going to be required, low emission vehicles, so electric vehicles. If you think about the binders, fluoroproducts in the anode and cathode binders. If you think about fuel cells, it's the heart of the fuel cell stack is the heart of the fuel cell vehicle. And you cannot get the performance without a fluoroproduct as part of the membrane in the MEA. In a broader sense, so for sure, there's these large applications that require fluoroproducts. Even the infrastructure, when you think about charging stations, all the infrastructure is going to require the properties of fluoroproducts. And then just more broadly, the example that we used in the presentation wasn't specifically about the fuel cell, the MEA. It was about the components that are actually just important for the vehicle in general, whether it's an ICE engine or electric or fuel cell electric vehicle. So the amount of fluoroproducts in a vehicle is substantial. If, as we mentioned before, we can provide more information, reaching out and give you more details. And maybe this is something that we put in the Q&A to help with more tangible examples, but we are happy to help in that respect.
Great, thank you, Denise. And I'm seeing a question here that I'm happy to just answer quickly, which is if there is the 1,000 character limit on the response, can you attach documents to your submission to the CFE? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You can attach documents that provide more data and further explanation where needed, including, for instance, on how a product might contribute to the Green Deal or other points that you want to emphasize. That said, it's important to remember it's the authorities put the onus on the submitter to label any sensitive information as confidential, even though the CFE submission process is confidential and not made public. Please make sure that if you do attach any documents that are sensitive, that they are labeled as such, as Dirk raised earlier in the webinar. I have an operational question here that maybe Cedric or someone on the team to end with. It's important because it has to do with the follow-up. It says, after today, if I have questions, should I reach out to my Chemours sales representative? Is Chemours willing to help outside of this webinar?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, as we stated earlier on, the idea here is that we remain available for our customers and for the value chain customers of our customers. Whoever has question through our Chemours sales representative, through sometimes Chemours technical support people, we are happy to collect those questions and bring to you the best answer from our experts, from our specialists here. This is definitely what we aim to do here. So please, indeed, as I indeed presented during the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Chemours contacts in case you have questions. We will not be able to kind of teach everyone how to answer in every single details, as I think Dirk has raised. This questionnaire is highly linked to what is your business and what is the impact on your business potentially. So we don't necessarily have the answer. We can help you to identify basically products and applications. But I mean, again, in general, our products are very well known. So, but here we can help definitely, and again, our people will be available to support here.
Thank you, Cedric. And I think with that, we're at the top of the hour. If you would like to say some closing words to customers who have joined.
Yeah. No, definitely. Thank you very much, Sebastian, for the moderation here. Well, again, as usual, this has been a live event, as you all understood. So sometimes the technical side is also a challenge with internet connection or with the tool itself. So hopefully this was still a nice experience for all of you. And again, this has answered a certain number of questions you have in this process. We once again a warm thank you to all of you for your participation. For your attention, for the questions. We have tackled a certain number of questions, but we've received much more, and some of them were too complex to tackle directly here. So we will look at this. We will see how we can get back to you with some, again, guidance here or feedback. But again, a very big thank you to you for your participation, as well as well, again, Sebastian, Denise, Dirk for the presentation today. Again, we are all together in this journey, and we really expect a collective effort here in order to influence and share feedback through this call for evidence. Thank you very much again to everyone, and well, stay tuned. You will get this info packet that we mentioned very shortly. Thank you very much. Bye bye.